Let him in. Good evening and welcome. And Happy New Year, everyone. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the City of Rockport, of the Rockport City Council. Today's January the 11th, 2022, and the time is 6:30 p.m. The meeting will be held in person at the training room of the Rockport Service Center, 2751 State Highway 35 bypass, Rockport, Texas, with social distancing guidelines and using the video conferencing application Zoom. These actions are being taken to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 by avoiding meetings that bring people into a group setting. Video conferencing capabilities will be utilized to allow individuals to address the City Council. Members of the public can participate in the meeting remotely via Zoom. If you go to the city website, you'll be able to find the link under the agenda section. Public participation is valued, and citizens wishing to express their views on any topic or agenda item can electronically submit a citizen participation form in order to register to speak by going to the City of Rockport website. Or there's a QR code that can be scanned. If attending the meeting in person, register before the meeting begins. Using the same form, citizens can also provide written comments to the City Secretary at 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Then the mayor will read comments and be summarized in the minutes of the meeting. I'd like to take attendance. Ward 1. Here. Ward 2. Here. Ward 3. Here. Ward 4.
Here.
Mayor here. I note the presence of a quorum and call the meeting to order. Please rise as Councilman Jackson leads us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looks like we're in day, maybe 2.5, 3 or 4 day winter, so. Item number 3, citizens to be heard. At this time, comments limited to 3 minutes will be taken from the audience from persons who have signed the speaker's card located on the table in the back of the training room of the service center and delivered to the city secretary before the meeting begins, or written comments received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting on any subject matter that is not on the agenda will be read by the mayor and summarized in the minutes of the meeting. Persons wishing to address the council and who have registered using the citizen participation form will have up to 3 minutes to speak. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, the council may not discuss or take action on any item that has not been posted on the agenda. While civil public criticism is not prohibited, disorderly conduct or disturbance of the peace, as prohibited by law, shall be caused for the chair to determine the offender's time to speak. In taking these in order, I have some citizen participation forms that were received in the city secretary's office early this afternoon. And the first one is from Andrew Kane. I believe you're on Zoom, Mr. Kane.
I don't think I marked citizens to be heard. I believe I marked agenda item 7.
You've got a speaker on here? On the specific
Speaker for-
agenda? Oh, I'm sorry.
Speaker for-
Item 7. I'm sorry, you're right, okay. You're on agenda item 7, and, okay, so then I'll move to the, we'll get you in a second. Adelaide Marlatt.
Hi, my name is Adelaide Marlatt, live at 456 Augusta, and I've been here before, so you know who I am. I'm here to make one appeal, one more, I hope, appeal for the funds for the Greater Rockport Country Club drainage system, to use the funds that are being distributed under the American Rescue Plan. You all know what it is. You all know why we're here. We're here because this plan fits us, our system, so well. It is to help systems that need to be made more resilient to extreme weather events. You know that's what happens to us. A lot of things have happened in the last few weeks, and today, or yesterday, I guess it was, I sat down and read the minutes from the last time we came to the drainage meeting that we had here in City Council. I was a little dismayed at some of the comments that I obviously didn't hear by some of you up here. You might go back and read some of those. They are a little bit disheartening to the country club people. You are referring to us as being a part of the moving things, and it just makes, it hurts. You also are talking something about drainage, and I do applaud you for putting some drainage financing in this new instrument. But when I heard you talk about systems that would be fixed with it, it was Austin Street, Shell Ridge, who is in the county, they're not even in the city, and Club Lake, and some of the others. The greater Rockport Country Club drainage, stormwater drainage system wasn't even mentioned. And this is the system that serves 2,500 people. What other drainage system serves that many people? I wonder. We are ready, we are needy, and the time is now. Can you help us?
Ben, moving on to the consent agenda. All consent agenda items listed are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Does anyone wish to remove the item on the consent agenda for discussion?
Make a motion to approve item number 4 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second. Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 5. Deliberate and act on second and final reading of an ordinance approving and adopting new voting board reapportionment map of the city and revising council member board boundaries in response to the 2020 census, providing for the redistricting of the 4 city council wards within the city of Rockport, Texas, providing the savings clause, severability clause, and an effective date. This was discussed previously in the meeting. I don't believe anything has changed from our last meeting in the boundaries. I don't know if is Matthew on Longoria online?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Longoria, anything, would you like to add anything to this item?
No, Mr. Mayor, there's been no changes since the last time this went before the council. This would be the final reading, and this would get would meet the 90-day requirement before the next election.
Council, any questions for Ben? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve and adopt the new voting ward reapportionment map of the city and revising the council member ward boundaries in response to the 2020 census.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Jackson, a second from Mr. Brundrett. Any further discussion? Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Item number 6, deliberate and act on second and final reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 14, amusements and entertainments of the City of Rockport, Code of Ordinances, creating Article 3, coin-operated machines, establishing an occupation tax, providing for applicable rules, regulations, providing for repealer, severability clauses, and establishing an effective date. Second reading, I don't believe there's any changes to this reading.
I had a quick question on the occupation tax. What does that necessarily mean? Is it just like a fee fee associated with that ordinance to the vendor?
Sir, it allows us to keep track of them, but it also covers some of the expense associated with it, with the gaming machines. The state sets the maximum fees, also sets some of the fees. And really, it's a boilerplate ordinance that a lot of cities use, and we just cut and paste those in.
So I guess the tax is a permit or a fee?
It is.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion on item 6.
Make a motion to approve item number 6 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Gibbons, second, Ms. Hammond. Any further discussion? Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Item number 7, deliberate and act on a resolution approving a plan of finance to issue general obligation refunding bonds to refund a portion of the city's outstanding indebtedness in the acquisition and construction of certain public improvements, and authorizing the city staff and professional advisors to prepare and distribute all documents and take all actions deemed necessary in connection with preparing the issuance of such obligations, including the selection of underwriters and the preparation and distribution of a preliminary official statement. I have 2 people who wish to speak on this. Mr. Kane,
Yes, sir.
you're up, sir.
I'm here. Okay. So I'm a little unprepared, so I'm gonna have to go off the cuff, but I hope I'll do all right. So here we are again, less than a year and a half away from when we pass these tax notes. Instead of going to a general obligation bond and getting voter approval, we were told by your financial expert that we could afford these tax notes. In fact, we were told they were going to be 10-year tax notes. The newspaper saying now there's 7, but they were going to be 10-year tax notes because of the way our debt was structured, that we wouldn't probably have to refund them because we were paying some debt off and we could backload this thing, and it's something we could easily afford. So now we're hearing that we need to go ahead and refund these by the financial expert. So let's talk about Mr. Henderson. So a little over a year ago, he said this is something we can afford. He gets paid a big commission. Y'all said you listened to the industry experts, not the citizens who said we can't afford this. And now we're coming back here and we need to refund him. And he gets another commission. I would ask that he forgives this commission if this is what you do, because he gave bad advice over a year ago. So let's talk about the city hall. It's 33% now over the latest inflated budget, 33% increase, and you want to keep going forward. The citizens again warn that this is something we can't afford. Now we're talking 12 to 16 million. That's 33% increase. When's this madness going to stop? Let's talk about other items you want to do COs on. Cars, it's in the budget. You put it in the budget. Some of the drainage, it's in the budget. So we've got it in our budget, and now we're trying to do certificates of obligations. The citizens have spoken, and they said they want to be a part of this process. They want to be a part of the debt that we're creating. They want a voice. You've had several opportunities to put on the ballot these certificates of obligations that we petitioned. You've had several opportunities to bring them to the voters as general obligation bonds. But yet here we are again, the city council, the mayor, they're trying to backdoor us, take a voice away from us. What you need to do is put it on the ballot, come to the public, sell the project, tell us why we need it, trust the citizens. The citizens overwhelmingly passed 2 out of the last 3 bonds they faced in a countywide election. Trust the citizens, explain it. By continuing to do tax notes, certificates of obligation, you are removing the transparency and the voice of the citizens who pay your salaries, the city staff salaries, and we sure as heck paid $400,000 we're going to pay Henderson to refund those bonds that he just got commissioned on. This is madness. Stop it. Let's be transparent. Let's be fiscally conservative, and let's act like the Republicans y'all claim y'all are. Again, you're listening to Henderson, who's paid a commission a year ago, sell tax notes. You can handle it. We wouldn't have to refund it. We got 10 years. Now he's wanting to refund him. He gets another commission. I would fire somebody that gave me bad financial advice, not pay him another commission. Be transparent. I'm asking city council. I know the mayor's not listening. Be transparent. Look at what y'all are doing. Listen to what y'all told us a year and a half ago or less. And how did it wind out? The citizens were right. You're over budget. You can't afford future debt. And here we are restructuring, just like we predicted. And you said we were misinformed, and you listened to industry. You were listening to the industry experts. How's that working out for us? It's costing us how much to refund these bonds? $400,000 in taxpayer money. Is that what's going to cost us? Because you're taking bad advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Kristie Rutledge.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Well, I'm really surprised to see this on the agenda tonight because it has been 16 months since the tax notes were passed. Over 345 citizens rushed to sign a petition asking for a vote on the certificates of obligation. The city council passed tax notes anyway, $14.7 million in tax notes. And now we're coming back for another, we don't really even know how much. There's 3 different debt obligations or types of debt structuring obligations in this agenda tonight. It's zero transparency. We have no idea what sorts of projects are in there or why this is necessary. Citizens made it clear to you that they wanted a voice in the debt that they would be required to repay. So this city council needs to seriously consider who you're working for. Are you working for Bob Henderson? Are you working for the mayor? Are you working for the citizens who elected you? Because we elected you to bring transparency. Let us know how long this is going to be paid out over. What is the total amount of interest? What are the fees involved? What are Mr. Henderson's fees? Who else is getting fees on this? Bond counsel, other bankers. There's a lot of fees involved in this. So how much more is this going to cost us? Put it out, all of it out there, get all of your citizens involved, put it to a vote. Whatever you need to get this city hall done. It's a project we would have probably rejected because it was overpriced to start with and it was at the wrong time. You brought it to us during the middle of COVID and after going through the crisis of Hurricane Harvey. And it's overpriced, it's at the wrong place, and you have a really nice building you could have made into a city hall with a few $1 million anyway. But we need to go forward, and we need to go forward in a way that unites our community instead of divides us. So bring all the information to us, put it on the May ballot, and let us know who's getting paid what, how much is this going to cost us, and how much other debt is involved. Because we couldn't even plan a year out, and now we're going to stretch this debt out over 20 years. How many other projects are out there? Are we going to be able to handle our capital improvement needs over the next 20 years when we stretch this out? Mr. Henderson told County Commissioner Laubach that the reason they didn't do tax notes in the first place at the county level is because there wouldn't be money available for capital improvements. So what kind of overall financial picture does this leave us in? Bring us all the information, consider all the projects that are needed when you consider refunding and have transparency with the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy.
Control of it.
Okay, we've got item 7. Mr. Henderson, you want to lead us out here, please, sir?
Absolutely, Mayor. I'm happy to address the topic as I think all the members of the City Council and, of course, members of the public who have accessed your agenda packages. There's a 3-page plan of finance that gives a what by Bob Henderson standards might be a fairly concise description. I know that, Mayor, you feel like I get verbose sometimes, but in this plan of finance, there's an introduction section. That's the first page that kind of explains, how we got here, starting back in February of 2020 when the City Council first started during budget deliberations, developing a capital improvement plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2020. It discusses the history of the proposed certificate of obligation transaction that was slated for July of 2020. That was $20,750,000. I think most of the the citizens who've actually been paying attention understood. Because of the nature of the emergency notes, the emergency anticipation notes, which were issued over a 10-year period of time, and I think the public has, and probably I may have misspoke once or twice. You know, tax notes generally by state law require a 7-year final maturity. The tax notes that were issued by the city of Rockport had a 10-year final maturity, and that was because of the fact that those were anticipation notes issued for emergency purposes pursuant to the state law as presented to the city council by the city council's bond attorney firm, McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. So those notes were issued as 10-year notes. As the records will reflect, what I said at the time was that we could afford the 10-year paying off that note in 10 years as they were originally issued, provided that the city understood there would be no capacity for any additional capital improvement programs. In other words, you had to, at least in the intermediate future, postpone the balance of those capital improvement items that were on that original $20,750,000 note. We were quite clear in the public in saying that if you needed, before that 10-year note was paid off, if the city needed to come back for additional capital improvement, they were going to need to refund that debt. And in fact, we provided that flexibility to the city by putting in a 2-year call feature, making them callable at February 15, 2022, which would allow, as the plan of finance notes indicated, a current tax exempt refunding under federal tax law. As the council knows, as the public knows, the bids did come in higher than was anticipated over the original estimates of the project. There is a delta of funding there. This was discussed with great detail and transparency at the city council's special council meeting of December the 30th. You also heard a presentation from the construction manager and the apparent low bidder on that project, ways to try to reduce that cost overrun. Of course, again, as the public knew, there were capital improvement programs for equipment and other items. You've got an ongoing need for streets and drainage projects that were postponed as a function of the certificate of obligation transaction being converted to a tax note dealing only with the true emergency needs of the city for certain consequences of Hurricane Harvey. Page 2 of the plan of finance indicates the city's outstanding debt. I think it's all self-explanatory. I'm happy to answer any questions the council might have. And then we get into the actual plan. The plan of finance does outline 3 different types of financings that the city would need to undertake to accomplish its intermediate goals. These are not things that I or the bond attorney dreamed up out of thin blue air. This is all a function of statutory authority under the general laws of the state of Texas. And I believe that the city's bond attorney, Mr. Spurgeon, should be on standby to answer any questions you have about that. What we are talking about in terms of the 3 transactions, and I'm not necessarily going to take them in order in this plan of finance. The first one is being $8.1 million in tax notes. I think we're very clear as to exactly what that number is and what the purposes of that financing would be for, to fund the remaining City Hall project, including furnishings, equipment, AV, and security, off costs, other equipment needs of the city. All of these were detailed in great amount of detail in the December 30th meeting. I think that Mr. Caruth displayed an Excel spreadsheet at that meeting that very precisely identified what these items were for. That equipment did include an allowance for public safety dispatch and other items. And allowing language in that note would allow, again, pursuant to state statutes, if we are able, we being the city, if the city is able to achieve some cost savings on the City Hall project by utilizing any of the suggestions recommended by the construction manager and the low bidder, then those savings could be applied to streets and drainage projects, which, as we all know, is an ongoing need in the city of Rockport. Pursuant to the state law, because the emergency declaration of the governor issued following Hurricane Harvey has now expired, we are no longer able to go 10 years on notes. We're going to have to back up to 7 years, which is the basic statutory limitation for tax notes. So this, pursuant to the law, these notes have a final maturity of 7 years, well within the useful lives of the equipment, as well as the building itself. For those people who may not be aware, recent legislation in Austin does require the city to take into consideration the useful lives of the items that they are financing and not allowing the average useful life of a financing to exceed that of the items being financed. Obviously, we're not even exceeding the useful life of the equipment, let alone the 70-year useful life of the building. So that's 8.1 million. There is a certificate of obligation transaction that is being contemplated. Another agenda item on your agenda this evening is to give notice of intent for that item. This would be an amount of $3.5 million to finance street and drainage projects. The ordinance that's been proposed is available to the public. I think it's on your website now. Again, Mr. Spurgeon's online to answer any questions about that. But because that is the only stated use of the proceeds of the certificates of obligation, there can't be any question that 100% of that money will be used for streets and drainage. Exactly what streets and drainage projects the ordinance doesn't limit it to that, but it is absolutely limited to streets and drainage. So with that in mind, let's go back up to the first one on this list, which is the general obligation refunding bonds. The biggest issue, I think, is obviously the refunding of what had originally been a $14.7 million tax note for the City Hall. As was discussed at the time, I think the public clearly understood, should have, if they'd been familiar with the process, that it was anticipated all along that these things were going to have to be refunded should any other capital come up. What we're now talking about doing is taking what had originally been a 10-year final maturity and extending it to 15 years. This is critically important because the plan of finance indicates that we can, and I'm completely confident on this, and the notes indicate that we will not have to have, the plan of finance indicates we will not have to have any kind of tax rate increase in the event of this refunding. We can do the $8.1 million tax note. We can do the certificates of obligation for $3.5 million. And so long as the general obligation refunding bonds extending the tax note out to 15 years is accomplished, we can do that with no tax rate increase, which of course is what we told the public when we originally proposed the $20,750,000 transaction. There was to be no tax rate increase there. And this gets us back to that by extending that debt to 15 years. But one thing I want to point out is that there is another debt transaction of the city of Rockport, which is a Series 2012 general obligation refunding bond. The average interest rate for the city of Rockport's debt is extremely low. And the reason it's low is that as interest rates have fallen over the course of the last 10 years, the city has been closely monitoring the debt portfolio and refinancing debt at lower interest rates whenever the opportunity presented itself. It's not anything different than what the citizens of Rockport do with their home mortgages, for example. When interest rates have fallen, they've refinanced their home mortgages. The city of Rockport has done that. There is a Series 2012 GO refunding bond that becomes currently callable at February 15, 2022, the same date that these tax notes from 2020 become callable. They can be refunded for interest rate savings. I'm not going to misrepresent anything. It's not setting the world on fire. The interest rates savings associated with refunding that debt would only be about $62,500. Interest rates are going up right now. By the time we get the securities offering documents done the ratings in place and able to affect this transaction. Interest rates may very well have risen to the point that it's not cost effective to refund those 2012s. But we think that it's prudent to go ahead and draft the documents in a way that gives the city council the latitude to do that, should it be deemed economically feasible at the time we actually go to market. The third page goes to tax rate impact, and again, it's a very short paragraph. As long as we do the refinancing of the 2020 tax notes, taking that final maturity out from the original 10 years to 15 years, which was publicly discussed and contemplated at the time, there will not be any tax rate increase on this transaction. If the city of Rockport continues to enjoy the extraordinary growth in its taxable assessed valuation that it has seen since Hurricane Harvey, undoubtedly that tax rate is actually going to fall despite these new financings. The next section of the report, again on page 3, timing and selling of the debt. Neither the refunding bonds nor the tax notes require any sort of notice of intent or waiting period to sell. So we can sell that debt as quickly as we can get the security offering documents completed and get the bond ratings in place. The certificates of obligation per state law require 2 things: publishing of notice of intent to issue in the newspaper at least 46 days in advance of the council action to issue, and posting such notice on the city's website. If we were in a flat interest rate environment, I would say let's just postpone the refunding bond sales and the tax note sales until the certificates of obligation are ready in terms of those waiting periods, because there would be no penalty to the taxpayers of Rockport, of which I am and have been since 1984. But we're not in a flat interest rate environment anymore. Interest rates have been going up pretty substantially since December rather, and continue here in January to go up. So it would be our recommendation to not risk higher interest rates on a combined financing of about $5 or $6 million, waiting on authorization for $3.5 million deal. And in that regard, we have provided as another attachment to the council package a timetable of events that tracks the timing of all 3 of these transactions and anticipates selling the tax notes and the refunding bonds about 3 weeks sooner than the certificates of obligation, only because, again, we're expecting the Federal Reserve to raise overnight Fed funds rates, and that we're expecting that to have an impact on the long-term tax rates as well. In summary, just as we discussed in 2020, the ability to issue the debt without a tax rate increase, it was true then, it's true now. We do need to, however, refinance tax notes that were again issued at 10-year basis. We need to refund them back out to 15 years in order to meet the projections that were provided way back in 2020 and still hold true today. I know I went through that probably with more detail than the mayor, and I understand Mrs. Jackson also likes me to speak less. It's not like I haven't heard that before. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I just want to be absolutely clear that I give as much transparency and detail as possible so that there's no confusion among the citizens or, of course, the city council.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. I just want to reiterate, when we issued those tax notes, it was with full understanding at the time that we were going to refinance. We're going to refund at some point in the future.
Yes, sir, it was. It was publicly discussed repeatedly.
Any questions for Mr. Henderson?
This letter?
Yeah, this letter.
Is that what he's referring to?
Yeah, this came out late. I don't know if we got this to everybody.
I've got copies for council, and I apologize that you didn't get it. I'm going to hand it out to you now, but what Bob just went through, I think Kevin did a good job of summarizing on his attachment that you have, but I'm going to go ahead and pass this out to you. I apologize that you're just now getting it.
This came in late this afternoon.
About 3:30, 4 o'clock, somewhere in there.
Okay. But it is. It's just,
All right. I was under the impression it had already been distributed. I apologize if
I didn't. But, here we go. So the item we're looking at right now is to act on the resolution to approve the plan of finance with the scenario you just laid out. So we want to make sure that everyone knows the step-by-step process we're going through.
I mean, I just personally feel like there's a lot of there with information and questions. Our director of finance is not even available tonight to be here and answer questions. That concerns me a little bit.
I think she's online.
I'm looking to see.
I'm
if she-
actually online.
Okay. It was kind of thrown in there. I'm a little bit taken back just how quick it was kind of put up in here. And I think there's a lot of questions up in the air, and I'm not feeling 100% comfortable, putting $8 million of money onto our debt without having those questions answered and not having some time to look over the documents. That's just where I'm at right now.
Okay. Well, this is what we talked about in our special meeting on the 30th about the process, and this is the process that was put together. And this letter might help you out some, but it was still in the writing that we have in front of us.
We just
summarizing a little easier. You look at it.
Well, no, I just got the letter now. So, I mean, I'm just getting the letter now.
Right.
And I haven't gotten a chance to read it.
I thought we had it out there, but it came in about 3:30, 4 o'clock.
I mean, I guess my first question is, when does this actually have to be pushed through without learning? 'Cause I mean, I would like to personally postpone it till I have a chance to read this, get some more information, and to have a chance to learn more about what we're actually getting into before we get into it. I mean, that's my first question. When is the absolute last deadline? And I don't think today would have, I mean, it's pretty quickly.
I'm sorry, is that question being directed at me?
I think so.
Okay, I apologize. The answer is that as the plan of finance outlines, there are 3 separate debt transactions involved here: a GO refunding bond, a tax note, and a certificate of obligation. Per the plan of finance, the only one where the timing is really critical that the city council take action tonight is that we give notice of intent and get that publication requirement and posting requirement started. What's important, and I want to encourage whoever's operating this Zoom system to open the mic for Mr. Spurgeon. What's important to know is that even taking city council action to give notice of intent does not mean that you're actually issuing the certificates of obligation. That action would take place at a separate city council meeting in February. So even if you give notice of intent to do that, you have not taken any kind of binding action that would incur debt. So there is nothing critical about taking action tonight on the refunding bonds, and there's nothing critical about taking action tonight on the tax notes. What would be helpful, given the rising interest rate environment, is that you do take action to give notice of intent to issue. But again, that's not binding action. It does not commit the council as a whole or any individual council member to take approving action on the actual issuance when that comes back up for action in February. Mr. Spurgeon, are you with us? I don't have a list.
Unless he's under a different name, I have not seen him come through the window.
So Bob, just make sure I understand your answer to the question. So February is when you'd like to have this kind of put out in front of council to be approved. So we have, it's January 11th now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I clicked on participants and now I don't know how to fix my screen here. Let me go over to the timetable of events. And that was also distributed with the package. I don't know if that's on the council screen or not. We would anticipate, the pricing of the notes in February 22nd, and pricing of the bonds on February 22nd. Pricing of the certificates of obligation would not take place until March the 8th. now that I have that in front of me. But I do think that it's important, again, that we consider it, city administration and the finance team, including myself, the bond attorneys, the Texas Attorney General's office, the bond rating agencies and so forth, would need 4 weeks or so, at least, advance notice to proceed, an indication by the city council of their intent to proceed with this plan of finance. And that's why one of the agenda items is approval of a plan of finance. Does that have to happen tonight? No, ma'am. It doesn't have to happen tonight.
That's kind of what I'm wondering, is if there's something we can postpone to next meeting so we can have some time, a couple weeks, just to get a little bit more deeper into the deeper things of these bonds and what we're actually spending our money on and what we're actually coming to a commitment to.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just feel more
the next
comfortable
city council-
being able to do that.
I
If
think
we
that-
have
I
a
think
couple
it-
weeks, that would be, I think, better for us. I think it just came up really fast and there's a lot of questions. I'm only speaking for myself, not the rest of the council, but I would like if we can get a little bit more into the weeds and understand more of what we're getting into before we actually get into it, even if it's intent,
If y'all,
Well,
if y'all
again,
would like to, we can bring it back and have, we could even get a workshop if that works with Mr. Morton.
Again, I'm speaking for myself. I would like to know more information before I'm gonna put, $8 million more onto our debt. If it's,
No,
it's
I
not a small
understand
chunk of
that,
change to me.
Councilwoman. And I happened to attend the meeting on December the 30th. I think that all of the details of those figures were discussed in December 30th. But again, take the time that you need. What I would suggest is this, strictly from a timing perspective in a rising interest rate environment. The next regular city council meeting, which is 2 weeks from today, to consider the plan of finance, certainly is not going to interfere. We can run some things, simultaneously. It's not going to interfere with the issuance of the notes or the geo refunding, should the council ultimately elect to do that. And it is, of course, your decision. I would ask, in the interest of timing and the interest of trying to minimize interest rate expense to the citizens of Rockport, that you would go forward with the giving the notice of intent to issue the COs, because again, it's not binding. There's all you're doing is publishing something in the newspaper and putting it on your website that says it's our current intent, but we haven't, and we're going to take final action on it on March the 8th, based on this calendar, March the 8th, and we may or may not do it, but we're considering. But having said that, I'll leave it to the discretion of the elected officials.
Mayor and City Council, this is Katie. We do have the option, as Mr. Henderson explained, we do not have to take action immediately. We just need to get the intent out there so that we can move forward with a plan that we can bring back to you at the next council meeting and discuss in more detail.
Katie, it's Brad. If we do delay, I guess the intent to the next council meeting, can we either call for a workshop or some kind of meeting with you to help explain this to us? Would that delay be, I guess, counterproductive or hurt us in any way?
It would essentially push the calendar back 2 weeks. I'll let Mr. Henderson back me up on this, but I don't believe that it would totally derail anything. The challenge is that it could have a negative long-term effect on the interest rates, depending what the Federal Reserve does. They're creeping up at this point, but it may not be more than a huge amount. But then again, we just don't know. That would be, from my perspective, the only thing I think that would totally be a challenge would be the delay of the calendar, which would push back the intent by 2 weeks.
I concur exactly.
And then the issue with the intent to issue, by being published in the newspapers and I guess public notice. Does that have anything to do with if we do intend to put this to a ballot, or if it gets petitioned and it has to go to a May election? Are we trying to push for a date on that?
Well, I'm I'm hesitant to practice law without a license, but it does not appear our bond attorney is with us. And here's what I would say. Under the Uniform Election Act of Texas, there are only two uniform election dates, May and November. In order to have a May election, you would have to call for an election by sometime, I don't have the exact date in front of me, but sometime early part of February. I think, I don't know, 16th, 17th, something like that. I think you have to have called, and again, please don't hold me to that date because I don't have it in front of me. But I think in early to mid-February, you're going to have called that bond election in order to do it to May. If you guys decide that you want to go ahead and call a bond election for whatever it is you want to call, whether it's the $3.5 million that's currently being contemplated for the certificate of obligation, or it's for the equipment, it's for City Hall, whatever. If you guys want to go ahead and call that election, you need to do it pretty quick in order to do the May election, or you're going to have to wait till the November election. What that means, and there was a lot of discussion, and I'll turn it back over to city administration to handle that discussion, but what that means in terms of not only interest rates on debt, but remember what the construction manager and your contractor told you at the December 30th meeting, which is the subcontractors aren't going to hold the price past January 1. That's why y'all had a special meeting on December the 30th. The city council approved a agenda item, entering into a contract with Teal Construction, authorizing, I believe it was the mayor, to go forward with that. Not only would I be concerned about potentially notable higher interest rates if we wait until a May election, at least as it pertains, again, to the City Hall project and the equipment purchases that are part of the $8.1 million tax note. Not only would I be concerned about those higher interest rates, I would be concerned about what's going to happen to this construction bid on the City Hall project that is already 25-30% over budget, whatever that exact number is. I don't have that in front of me either. But having said that, I'll turn it back to city administration and the mayor and your discussion.
Council, if I may, I did not sit through the discussions last Thursday or Friday, so I've looked at these numbers, and I'll tell you what I see and where they came from, if that might help. And I totally understand your reluctance to vote on something that you're not sure of. So remember, you are here talking about these numbers primarily because the bid on City Hall was higher than expected. And that generated a number, and that number was $5.3 million, okay? So in the discussions with bond counsel and our financial advisors, the city has many needs, as you know. You know that much more than I. And so I think the discussion was, okay, what is the threshold? How much debt can we issue and not affect that tax rate and accomplish some good things for the community? So of the 8.1 million in tax notes, 5.3 of that is for the City Hall. 1.8 was set aside for vehicles and equipment. And then there was another $835,000 set aside for a backup emergency operations center. That's what makes up that 8.1 in the tax notes. Again, that left about 3.5 million available that you could issue if you wanted to and not impact that tax rate. And the discussion was you could issue that 3.5 million for drainage, streets and drainage projects, but those would need to be CO, certificates of obligations. That's a real brief, that's how I understood it. And I apologize that you didn't get that information.
No, I have that information.
Okay.
That's not what concerns me. It's just that concerns me is getting the information almost last minute and not being able to read through everything and not be able to make a sound decision. I completely understand where the money's going or where you guys would like it to go or what's happening in that situation. But there's more in the weeds that we need to get into if we're going to issue $8.1 million into our debt. I think that there's more questions that I would like to be answered. For one, Katie, I know that we had to put the vehicles into our budget. Are we just taking that out then? Is that what your plan is on that one?
Actually, Katie, if I'm wrong here,
Go ahead.
I believe you guys identified the vehicles and it was about 1.69 million, but you did not fund them. You identified that they would be
Yeah,
funded
that's what
through
I'm-
a debt issue.
But that's kind of my point there, is that there's questions
Correct.
that need to be answered, and this was really quickly put in front of us, and I'm just not comfortable with how quick it was put in front. That's my
We
point.
talked about all that in the budget process, and I know what the difficulties are along hiring process is involved. But that was all discussed, Katie, back in there. The vehicles were put in the budget, but there weren't
Correct.
funds. There's no funding mechanism. We were gonna have to go out and find funds for it.
That's just one question out of many. Yeah.
City Manager Morton pointed out just prior to the meeting that the vehicles fund, and Katie, help me understand that too. We had it coming out of the general fund and utility fund. We had it coming out of 2 spots. And I guess that just, when we approved the budget, that was not funded, but those were the funds that it was anticipated to come out of.
So when we put our budget together last year, we talked about the vehicles and equipment and beginning our vehicle and equipment replacement fund. And we told you at that time we would need about I think it was actually about 1.6 million in order to do so. Because of Hurricane Harvey and the recovery process, we got behind on our vehicles, and we have several vehicles that are 15 plus years old, and on our trucks for parks and public works. We also have some PD units that are 2012 models with over 150,000 miles on them, and they are literally self-destructing. When we talked about that back in the spring, late winter and spring, we had talked about the best way for us to do that would be to do a tax note. And I think I mentioned it to you guys back when we adopted the budget that my intention was to come back to you after the first of the year and do a 5-year tax note specific to the vehicles and equipment. Since that time, we've run into the new challenge associated with City Hall, where we're needing another almost 5.4 million to get City Hall up and to have enough funding for City Hall. So that's kind of where we're at the vehicles and equipment. And doing that, it's not going to make an impact on our tax rate because the way that it's done, and we kind of talked about that a little bit during the budget cycle too, is that we had capacity to do certain things. And we wanted to make sure that we kept our tax rate flat as we go through the next few years.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I just always remembered it coming out of the utility, like I thought we budgeted for out of the general and utilities, but I guess we didn't. The number was put to it. I guess we just didn't have the funding source yet.
I think I know what maybe y'all might be actually thinking is we currently in our operating budgets, we have a option in there where, or we have a line item where our departments fund their existing vehicles. So we have a vehicle and equipment replacement fund. For example, when we get a new police department unit, what we end up doing is they make monthly payments back to the fund to reimburse it for that particular vehicle, just like we were paying on a bank note. The challenge with that is that we did not replace vehicles for an extended period of time. And because those vehicles have reached that payback time and they're still on the road, we're no longer paying for some of those. And so that's why we need to do the tax note to catch ourselves up so that we then have our vehicles up and going and we're no longer running 15-year units, we're able to have them back on the 5-year or 5 to 7 year rotation, depending on the particular vehicle.
And this plan would get us moving on our vehicle replacement plan, where we would finance these vehicles, pay them off, but then continue, once the note's paid off, and I think we're looking at 3 or 4 years, we would continue to make that payment into a sinking fund so that when the vehicle reaches the extent or the end of its life, 7 or 8 years, we'd have funds to replace it with. That's the plan.
Okay, I guess I have one, hopefully last question here. So if we did the intent tonight and we wanted to do a workshop, or if we wanted to put it on the ballot later, on a later date, not saying that's the case, but we're still, we can do it that way as well. Just put the intent and put the wording that we want to do workshop, or, I mean, is that possible? Just to.
Yeah, we can do whatever the consensus of council decides, but what we're trying to do is just get a timing issue. If we approved every one of these items, these 3 items, it still does not obligate us to the debt. What it does is it puts the plan in place, as Katie says, to do a workshop, to do all the review, to do the rest of the work. We just have to make sure, plus we've got to work with the state, we've got to get everything else in line. But all this does is set the mechanism in motion. If for some reason council decides not to do anything, it doesn't cost us anything. But long term, we're still without a city hall, we're still without vehicles, we're still without drainage. We're going to be facing those issues. The key part of this, to me, is the fact that we do not have to increase the INS portion of the tax rate. This is a very simply absorbable. If you look at the schedule, I think all our debt, if we would do this, disappears. Right now, it's what, 2032, Bob, or 2030?
2034, I think, Mayor. You know, certainly by the 93%, as the debt of the city is structured today, Mayor, 93% of it pays off in 7 years by 2030. There is the other 7% that I think stretches out to 36 or 37, but 93% of the city's debt today pays off in a mere 7 years.
The city's in an extremely good position financially through sound management practices and being just paying attention to all this, taking good advice. Unless Aunt Matilda dies and leaves us in her will, the city runs just like most businesses. If you look at this as your personal household, you've got to that run. That's part of the process. As long as we can do it without hitting that tax rate. That's the important thing.
Do we have a number, either Katie or Mr. Morton? What do we have left in the older bonds? Is there any money left over that can be used in any of these things moving forward?
That's
I have not had an opportunity to get into the weeds. I cannot get access to my files. I apologize. Ms. Jackson asked for that earlier today and I wasn't able to get that together. Best of my memory, what we do have in older bonds that we have not spent yet cannot be spent on anything but parks and wastewater. I know that we went through everything back in 2020 when we were working on City Hall, and there was not anything available that could be used towards the construction of City Hall. There's very strict bond covenants on what's still outstanding.
That's because the way the covenants were written on those issues.
Absolutely, Mayor. It's a function of state law in order to preserve transparency, to make sure that the public can have good faith in the intent of the city council. Every time the city of Rockport or any other governmental entity in the state of Texas issues debt, there's very precise language as to exactly what the money can be spent for, and it can't be spent for any other purpose than that. So I have not reviewed the ordinances related to the debt that Katie is talking about. I know she's been in communications with the city's bond attorneys, and I'm confident that what she's saying is correct. There are very precise purposes for which that debt can be issued, and even if there are monies left over, unless the ordinance is provided for expenditures on public buildings, you're not going to be able to spend it for City Hall.
But you may be able to spend it for whatever covenant it's allowed still. I mean,
I think we had, I think you're right, Keith. I think it was parks, wastewater. I don't remember the numbers, but I think that's the only thing that was left. And it's not gazillions of dollars. It's just some money that was not.
I've not seen the number, and that's a great question, Councilman and Councilwoman Jackson, for asking that question earlier. We just, with Katie's absence, and it's not on her, we just weren't able to pull that for you, but we will certainly get that information for you.
If we do get that information, can we adjust the amount if we did find something? Or is that, if we do an intent today, that's the amount we have to
Well,
attend?
if their memories are right and it's in parks, we need to bring a parks project forward for you to spend that money on. If it's in streets and drainage, then you can spend it on streets and drainage. But as old as it is, I'm almost positive that you won't be able to spend it on the buildings.
Cannot spend it on City Hall. We did that research back in 2020. It's very limited, and that's why it hasn't been spent. But we could not spend it on City Hall.
And it's not a huge amount, if I remember correctly, that's left in both of those.
Correct.
But
It's very
the
small.
mayor, and if I might interject to address the councilwoman's question, it is still true, regardless of whether the number changes because there's surplus bond proceeds from other sources, or whether the city council elects to use fund balances, or if you are able to affect some cost savings in negotiations with contractors and equipment providers or what have you. It's still true that regardless of the source of the revenues, until the council actually takes definitive action to issue this debt, you can lower those amounts. It doesn't have to be 8.1 million. It could be whatever the city council decides at the time. And none of that would be impacted or locked in stone by approving a plan of finance or giving notice of intent tonight.
Thank you.
The other potential liability in not moving forward with at least making plans to issue the debt, I'm not talking about issuing the debt, but making plans, is we're not going to be able to tell if FEMA allows us to award that contract. We still haven't proven to the contractor that we're going to fund the project. So there's
Because
no,
there's only two bids.
there's only two bids, but there's no, it makes it difficult for them to negotiate with their subcontractors because there's no commitment on the city's part to do the project.
Correct.
So what they look at is, this is not a guaranteed project. They're going to move on to where they have. There's so much work out there right now. That's part of the problem why we only had two bidders. We talked about that last week.
The recap is, the only reason why we're here and had discussed this is because 2 weeks ago, we voted 5-0 to could get here. Because I remember clearly when the mayor said, if we have no intentions of moving on, there was no reason for us to even approve what we approved that night. And since we approved it, that's why we're here with what they said that, what they were gonna do, and that's why we're discussing it. Am I correct?
Right.
I do believe though that the December 30th meeting, when we discussed it, it was for funds for the city hall, not funds for everything.
And I believe that we talked about drainage as well. Drainage was talked.
About
That's why
drainage.
Adelaide brought up drainage.
I don't know.
We talked about,
A long time ago.
different projects, South Austin Street.
Yes.
Things like that, drainage down there. But nothing specific. You're right, we didn't go out and say.
Yeah, we didn't say yes.
$10 here, $20 there. We just,
mean-
in general, talking about.
When we talked about it, I thought it was just city council fund, or city hall funding, not plus a whole bunch of other things. That's what I thought, and I've been known to be wrong. I can Roger up if I'm wrong.
Well,
But one of my big concerns, and this kind of takes this a little bit sideways, is in Mr. Henderson's letter here, it starts with the long-term capital improvement plan. Where is that? Where is the long-term capital improvement plan? Where is that document?
Are you asking me or city administration?
No, I'm just kind of asking that in general about.
so I can tell you that we do have a list of projects out there that total about 26 million.
And I'm aware of
And
that.
I think you guys
What's the-
probably have seen that.
Yeah, it's lots of things. It's a wastewater treatment plant, it's streets, drainage, it's pretty comprehensive.
I've never seen it.
Okay. Well, I guess the city has put together a plan or identified needs into the future in every area of the city. And that totals about $26 million, other than City Hall. That's not part of it. And so as you go through your budget process every year and you talk about future capital, that list is drawn down. And you get to see those projects. And you get to tell direct staff which projects you want to spend money on or which projects you want to issue debt for. And that's generally how it happens. If you haven't seen that big list, we'll certainly share it with you.
Kevin, took it off already by the time it came to us. It was already taken off. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Because that's why it's so small. Beforehand, all that stuff used to be there, but they just knew there was no reason to even discuss it. There was no way we could fund it.
The thing is that there's other engineers out there who I've talked to who said that I can't believe the city doesn't have a 5, 10, 15, 20, 50-year capital improvement plan.
Yes, I don't disagree with that, but I think staff has developed that list of needs for you to consider. Staff is being proactive to develop that list.
My question's not getting answered. That's all right. I got it.
Bobby, Richard, if you find that, can you please send that out?
Oh, I have it. I had it emailed to me today.
So, anyway, one thing I would like to add with this is that, I understand this is just an intent, so we can have it out there in the world that we're intending to do this, and I honestly don't have a problem with that, because we're not tied to anything. But I think we definitely need a very informational workshop, sooner rather than later, with all of the information that we need in it. All of this, so that we know what we're talking about and everybody's on the same page. And we need that workshop, because a lot of these things that I've heard were discussed in the spring. Well, Brad and I weren't on the council yet. So we're going, yeah. So, there's a lot of moving parts in this that were not, discussed in the recent past. I'm just saying, there's a lot of moving parts out there, and tribal knowledge does not help those of us that are new to the process.
Oh, absolutely, I agree, and a workshop would not hurt. It never causes any problem to provide information and have discussion. And again,
Ms. Jackson, I'll show up and talk all you want me to.
just a reminder, we're here today because of the City Hall and I believe staff's effort to try to fund needed projects out there and not affect that tax rate. And that's where that total dollar amount came from. It wasn't an intent to just go issue additional debt. It's, hey, we're going to issue debt for City Hall. What is our limit without affecting that tax rate? And does council want to do that? The answer for you guys the answer is coming from you guys. If you just want to do City Hall, that's the direction you give us. If you want to issue that certificate of obligation, we issue the notice of intent today. If you want to use those tax notes to buy the equipment for all vehicles for police and other departments, then that's part of that tax note. This is designed to be a discussion, exactly what we're doing. So happy to answer any questions about that 8.1 million. You know, I told you 5.8 or 5.34, 5.3 goes to the city hall, 1.8, 1.9 to city equipment and vehicles, and then 835,000 would go towards that backup EOEC, Emergency Operations Center. The notice of intent is completely separate from that 3.5 million.
The notice of intent is just setting it up.
Right.
And then we can always not go anywhere with it if we so desire.
Notice of intent is setting up that CO, that 3.5.
Because there's a lot of moving parts with that requires if we pushed it off. The risk is looking at tax rates, or if we choose not to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to look at the, it's outlined right there, dispatch, 834, and like I said, vehicles and equipment is 1.9. But the way the covenants are developed on that is, if dispatch came in less, or if the vehicles came in less, we were able to move that because to other projects, excuse me, streets drainage or something, if we had to.
Well, that's a good point, Mayor. This 5.385 million for City Hall is a number that does not include any possible value engineering reductions.
Right.
Okay. So
That does not include that $1 million that alluded to. Last cost savings.
right, it does not.
Find some more.
If that savings happens, then theoretically you can use some of this money for other worded purposes.
Right.
And so you may want to include other language for this tax note to allow you to spend those dollars on something else.
What if it goes the other way?
Excuse me for interjecting. Excuse me for interjecting, Mr. Morton, but that's exactly correct. And the written plan of finance indicates that there is already language inserted in that note ordinance to allow any savings from value engineering to be spent on streets and drainage.
There you go. Thank you.
Question of whether it goes the other way, if the.
Yeah, right, if we continue to increase.
Yeah, that's,
I don't have a crystal ball, nobody does really, but if we,
and what we're doing, we're as conservative as we can be on these numbers.
well,
It's basically worst case because we cannot afford to be wrong. We did 5 different pricing projects, or 5 different pricing points when we were looking originally at City Hall. We worked with our construction management agent, and they're all their expertise, architect, and we kept refining what we felt was going to be the proposed bids. This is happening now on engineering projects, drainage projects, where you go out there and the engineer says this project should be $2 million. You bid it, and it comes in at 2.5 million. That just happens to be the way of the world right now. It's crazy. The cost of steel, I mean, wood finally has come down a little bit, but everything else is continuing to go up. Like they mentioned to us in the December 30th meeting, the subs cannot guarantee holding that rate because they don't know. And materials are back ordered. I mean, right now we're working on drain boxes for different projects that have been bid and they've actually been contracted for, but the manufacturers can't get them to us. Thank goodness that those costs are locked in right now, so we'll get them. What we need to do is lock in the costs as soon as possible if we're going to move forward. But again, these numbers are worst case, so could they go up? I guess they could, but let's hope they don't.
Well, in the City Hall, the good news is you bid the project and you have basically the bid that you want, although it's high. Those prices shouldn't go up too much, although you were warned by the contractor that you could see some increases. Again, so this number is based on that high bid and no value engineering reductions. So that should cover that cost if there are any slight increases.
any minor increase, we could probably cover it.
Right.
And we had a contingency number in there too. I forget what it was, but it was $600,000 or something in contingencies that they went through.
I believe you're right, Mayor. I can't put my hands on that right now.
I agree with Councilwoman Hadman that, I mean, we got this letter in the middle of the meeting. It's a lot to understand. And then, you know, as far as all the resolutions, those came to us on Friday evening. There's a lot to go through in that short period of time. I'm not the savant that some people may be. It's very difficult to vote on a 8.1 or $11.5 million deal. I know we're not issuing debt tonight. We're the intent. It's just a lot to get out to the constituents in that short period of time. Is my concern.
Any more questions or comments?
So is 7 an action item or not? An action?
Yes, 7 is an action item. Number 7 is to approve a resolution approving the plan of finance. That's what number 7 is. To approve the plan of finance to issue general obligation refund bonds to refund the city's outstanding indebtedness. The acquisition of construction of certain public improvements. So that's just the resolution that has to be put in place first before we move forward. Now, even if we do again issue the resolution, it does not obligate us to borrow the money. We just have there's certain legal things, and this is all drawn up by our bond counsel. And these are pretty much boilerplate resolutions and agreements. These are pretty much the same all over the state of Texas when people look at doing this.
Well, I make a motion that the city council approve a plan to finance and issue general obligation refunding bonds to refund a portion of the city's outstanding indebtedness and issue tax notes and certificates of obligation to finance the acquisition and the construction of certain public improvements, and authorizing city staff and professional advisors to prepare and distribute all documents and take all actions deemed necessary in connection with preparing for the issuance of such obligations, including selection of underwriters and the preparation and distribution of a preliminary official statement as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Second from Ms. Jackson. Any further discussion? Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Item 8, deliberate and act on a resolution expressing official intent to reimburse costs incurred for the acquisition and construction of various capital improvements in the city.
I make a motion the city council approve the resolution expressing official intent to reimburse costs incurred for the acquisition and construction of various capital improvements in the city as presented. Yes.
We have a motion.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hammond. Discussion?
Same non-binding, I guess, trying to pull that out, that
Just the
Yeah, it's just the resolution.
same kind of thing.
Correct.
The various capital improvements.
Right, it's just the resolution.
If I might, Mayor, in the absence of our bond attorney, this is strictly a housekeeping chore. All it does is allow you to reach back 60 days prior to the date of this adoption and allow the city to reimburse its general funds out of debt proceeds at a later date, if in fact the debt proceeds are actually issued. If the council decides not to issue the debt, this resolution has no impact whatsoever.
And also, we have a motion and a second. But I did have Kristie Rutledge wanted to speak on item number 8. We moved pretty fast. Ms. Rutledge, you're out there.
I'm looking for her, sir. Yes, she's online. Let's see.
I'm online, yes. I'm sorry, I've been driving. I'm trying to keep up with all that you have been saying. Item number 8, can you explain that to me? What is that?
May I, Mayor?
Please.
A reimbursement resolution is a resolution that's required by federal tax law addressing the use of the proceeds of a tax-exempt debt issuance. And what it does is very simply say that from the date of the adoption of this resolution, the city can go back 60 days, and from that date back, 60 days forward, 60 days ago from tonight, until the date that the debt is actually issued, any expenditures that the city incurs, engineering for streets and drainage projects, architectural engineering for the city hall, soft cost, site work, development, whatever. Any expenses that the city incurs from 60 days prior to today until the time that debt is issued becomes eligible under federal tax law to be reimbursed to the city's general fund out of debt proceeds. And that creates a situation where the city doesn't have to unduly burden its general fund balances on a specific project, and to properly capitalize long-term costs with long-term financing. So that's the effect of the resolution. But again, it's a housekeeping chore, and it doesn't bind the city council to issuing future debt or even incurring any particular costs related to a capital improvement project. If the city does not issue debt later, well, then obviously there's no debt proceeds to be reimbursed from, so the resolution has no impact. The short version, ma'am, is that this is a housekeeping chore under federal tax law.
Thank you. Can I have my 3 minutes now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I just want to say that in this item number 9, there's a portion there for vehicles. And we went through this extensively.
And we're on number 8.
You're on number 8. Okay. Well, if a vehicle was purchased.
And we're on item number 8.
If a vehicle was purchased.
I'm looking.
She's driving to my.
You still there, Ms. Rutledge?
I don't see her online, sir.
Yeah, I don't know what she was going to say, but I think we need to make clear that the certificates of obligation in number 9, and I know we're not there yet, Mayor, but
Right.
that is specifically for streets and drainage.
Right.
If you guys allow tax notes to be spent on vehicles, I would just remind you that even though the life of this tax note is 7 years, if the vehicle's life is only 3 years, the debt for that particular vehicle would be structured to be paid off in 3 years. And they will build that into the overall payout of the debt.
Absolutely.
So just because the issuance is 7 doesn't mean we're going to take 7 years to pay off that vehicle when we should pay 3.
No. So we had a motion and a second on number 8. Any further discussion? Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Now we move to number 9. Deliberate and act on a resolution authorizing publication and posting of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation to finance street improvements. This item is specific to the resolution that's required so that we can post, and I don't believe it's like 46 days of posting in advance. Valdez, is that?
I believe that's what he just said earlier, 46 days. I wrote the notes down, but yeah.
So all this is again, the paperwork or the housekeeping that's needed to get the authorization. It does not issue debt, does not bind us right now.
And you want to check, just be proper,
Yeah.
check to see if Kristie's back.
Ms.
on.
Rutledge, are you back?
Hold on one second. She is not back.
You mentioned the number of days. If you give me 1 second on that.
Well, Bob's still on. He can answer that question.
I am, and as part of the written plan of finance that I gave, there are two requirements, mayor and city council. One has to do with a publication in a newspaper of local circulation, and that publication has to occur 46 days. The first publication has to occur 46 days before the council can take action to adopt the resolution authorizing the issuance of COs. The second requirement is for posting this notice on the city's website. That day is 45 days. So it's a little confusing. And personally, it's kind of silly because the publication always takes longer than the posting. So again, 46 days, publication in the Rockport pilot in your particular case before the city council can take action. Otherwise, you have to post a notice on the city's website 45 days in advance of that action.
Rutledge is back in the meeting.
Ms. Rutledge, you're back?
I'm sorry, Mayor?
Ms. Rutledge, I believe she's back. I think she's connected again. Ms. Rutledge, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, are we still on item 8?
We're on item number 9.
We're on item number 9. Okay. On item 8, I got cut off. My phone died. Can I speak? Or did you already pass that?
Passed that already, ma'am.
Huh, okay. Continue then.
We're on item number 9. You can speak.
I'm a little behind on what item number 9 is. Can you explain that one to me?
An act on a resolution authorizing publication and posting of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation to finance street and drainage improvements.
Great. And so is it time for me to speak?
Yes, ma'am. You've been on.
Great. Thank you so much for your patience. Regarding streets and drainage and certificates of obligation for that, this agenda packet was extremely vague. It just said various streets and drainage projects. We have no idea what streets and drainage projects this is meant for. When you pass the tax notes, we knew that there was amount for Concho Street drainage project. So I don't believe that city council should vote for this item tonight. It should be, you should vote against it. There's no information for the public. Drainage projects are out there in the hazard mitigation plan. They've been in prior master drainage projects. All these things have been discussed about drainage maintenance that has been neglected. And that's even documented in the hazard mitigation plan that would be put off. We need a full disclosure of what all would be included in the streets and drainage. What streets are going to be repaired? What drainage projects are going to be done before you consider putting a notice in the paper. All of this needs to come back to a workshop. You do not have enough information, and the public does not have enough information to move forward with a notice in the paper. This is a very general thing, and I understand you were all trying to figure out how to spend as much money as you could without making the tax rate go up. I get it. And so that's why you put together this $11.62 million figure. You just kind of lumped it all in there. But we don't even know what projects have been taken care of and what projects haven't been taken care of through the Harvey funding at the county. And so what is this $3 million streets and drainage that you're talking about? What projects are going to be covered? Come back and talk to us about it. And specifically on streets and drainage. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I'm very concerned about the recent dialogue regarding drainage coming through a political action committee who happen to be relatives of several council members. And my concern about this is what is political about drainage? Nothing is political about it. I'm concerned that there was a letter dated January 6th, signed by the mayor and signed by the judge, the county judge, that said that there are no catch basements in any of the drainage projects. Why is that? We are in a coastal town. I have done cleanups at Little Bay, inside the shores of Little Bay, not on the roadside. It's full of trash. It's full of debris, large sheets of trash coming down through Tool Creek. I know Councilwoman Hatman has done cleanups through Tool Creek. trash is coming through the drainage systems. Let's get this right and let's make sure it's fully disclosed to the public. It's not a political issue and should not be handled through a political action committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rutledge. Now, again, this one is to act on a resolution authorizing publication of the notice of intent. So again, there's no dead issue projects identified. This is just so that we get moving.
I have
Sure,
a
it's
quick
clear.
question about this one.
Yes, ma'am.
So basically what we're doing with this, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, is, this is just, we're getting this passed now. So once we do decide what to do, we can hit those benchmarks of 46 and 45 days. It's not, we're gonna publish it in the paper next week, correct?
Well, if the council took action tonight, we would move to have it published in the newspaper as soon as reasonably possible. Hopefully, I think our schedule has it, the first publication coming out on this Saturday, given the publication dates of the Rockport pilot. But again, this is not binding. There is no effect to this other than a housekeeping compliance with the statutes until the city council takes action on March the 8th, which is the earliest possible date we could take action given state law timing requirements. There's nothing absolutely binding. And another thing that I want to say about the concept of delineating particular projects. I look, I'm a Boy Scout. I believe in full disclosure and being as honest and as clear with the public as we can be. But here's something that the public, or more accurately, you as elected officials need to think about. And you've seen this on the City Hall project, both pro and con. We saw the City Hall project come in 25, 30%. I heard someone say 30%, 3%. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I haven't run the numbers. And then we heard the construction managers come in and construction contractors come in and say, well, here we can save you $1 million in value engineering. So that number is nebulous. It moves around. I understand comments about, well, what exactly are we going to spend $3.5 million on in debt proceeds for streets and drainage? And the answer has to be streets and drainage. Now, we could say it's Austin Street streets and drainage, and we could say that the current estimate from the contractors or the construction managers or the engineers, whomever the experts might be, the current estimate is $3.5 million. But what happens, Councilwoman, if by virtue of economies of scale or, COVID is cured and labor costs reduced, what have you? What happens if the cost, instead of being 3.5 million, becomes 3.3 million? Okay, well, if we state in the documents that this is only for Austin Street as in drainage, then you find yourself with a situation where, okay, you've done your job as a manager, as a fiduciary of public funds, you've done your job to get it done for 3.5 million. Now we've got $200,000 extra money out there. And what are we going to do with that 200,000? If the language is so precise that we can't spend it on anything other than Austin Street, well, then we're required by law to put it back into an interest and sinking fund account. And then questions say, well, why is there so much money in the INS account? By informing the public, as I believe that City Council has done at the December 30th meeting, where Mr. Caruth, the city manager at the time, discussed Austin Street project estimate being $3.5 million. I think we've informed the public of what the intent of the City Council is. But do we want to tie our hands and say, well, if by good fortune the cost is 3.3 million, well, let's preserve the latitude to apply that other $200,000 to some other streets and project drainage. And I know that Mr. Villa and our other city councilwoman was talking about, is there any bond proceeds, they were talking about earlier this evening, is there any other, is there any leftover bond proceeds from previous transactions that we could apply to City Hall? And then Ms. Griffin accurately stated, well, yeah, there are, but they're minor amounts of money, number one. And number two, because of the language of those covenants or those bond ordinances or debt ordinances that were so restrictive as to what the use of money could be spent for, even if there is $200,000, we can't spend it on the City Hall because the language authorizing the use of proceeds in that ordinance did not pick up City Hall. So I understand that, I know I'm not supposed to respond to people who are making public comments, but I understand the young lady's question. I do understand it, and it makes sense on a lot of levels. But the city council has discussed very specifically Austin Street streets and drainage projects. I think based on those public discussions, the city council or the citizens ought to have some level of comfort that that's what we're talking about. But let's don't use such restrictive language that if Austin Street comes in at 3.3 million, now we've got $200,000 that we can't spend for any other streets and drainage project because we didn't identify any other streets and drainage projects. So I hope I'm making myself clear. It's not a matter of trying to hide the ball or to have the city council write themselves a blank check or anything like that. The city council's on record for the December 30th meeting that we're talking about all the streets and drainage. Let's have the documents be drafted in such a way, if there's a little extra money left over, we can spend it on other streets and drainage projects. I know that's long-winded. I apologize, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, well, I have a question here, just to kind of there. So say we did the intent to put this on publication. Do we have time to do a workshop and maybe come up with some of the major projects? And if we did put two specifics on this bond, can we change the wording where we can put that money into other things if it doesn't work out?
It's already done.
That's
the way it's.
Well,
he's saying don't do that. So I'm asking.
yeah.
Oh,
So all I would say is if you leave the language as streets and drainage and issue this notice of intent, that's what you will spend this money on. What project you spend that money on is still under your prerogative as council. So if the council identifies Austin Street as the priority project, then the debt is out there and issued. We bid that project and we build that project. But if council chooses as a group a different street or drainage project, as long as it's a street or drainage project, you can spend that money on that project.
And before if we were going to issue that bond or that certificate of obligation, do we have time to do a workshop so we can
Yes,
have that
absolutely.
discussion before we put that on?
Again, you're talking about 45 days, and we're not talking about issuing anything until March.
Just making sure that's understood, not just for us, but people listening.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that that's clear out there.
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing publication and posting of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation to finance street and drainage improvement as presented.
Second.
The motion from Mr. Diaz, second from Mr. Jackson. Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4.
Aye.
Mayor, aye. Thank you. Item 10, reports from council. You go first.
Just once, I wish I wasn't Ward 1, so I didn't have to go first. Things are moving great in Ward. The district is doing great, merchants are doing great. We're looking forward to good things this year. And we'll see what happens.
Okay. Ward 2.
Nothing that. Happy New Year. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay.
Piggyback on JD, just Happy New Year. Hopefully everybody made it through the holidays, and look forward to moving forward with our interim city manager for now, and see what we can do to move forward. Thank you all.
Ward 4.
Not much to report here. Happy New Year. Kids are back in school, so yay. But yeah, I just hope everyone had a great holiday and a Happy New Year, and thanks for coming tonight.
Well, we're definitely seeing the resurgence in our COVID case counts. Remind everybody to be careful, be safe. I did speak with a couple of officials with tax dollars inquiring into projects and potential. So there's a couple of things that we want to make sure that we keep on their radar. First thing I did was thank them for all of their good work on the Adelaide Bridge. That's progressing nicely. And they're on schedule right now. But we were talking about things on this 35 South. It's actually not in the city limits, but there's a lot of concern between Aransas Pass and the city of Rockport, where Rockport terminals are right now. There's talk about getting that rail line moving again. So just discussing with them, our concern is the life safety issues here with our citizens, people that are traveling on that road. If you are going to reactivate that rail line, make sure that it's safe and maybe get that road widened a little bit over there. And also talk about turn lanes and spots on business 35 South. And then also ask them to take a look at this is 35 to the north between Henderson and Broadway. There's some concern with the amount of traffic that we're seeing there again, and we don't have a turn lane around the hotels around La Quinta and the Fairfield. So it's just something that they're going to take a look at. No promises, but just trying to keep projects on their radar. Chairman Todd Hunter was very helpful with that because he's now involved with transportation on the state level. And he asked if there were any concerns about textile last week. I said, well, just a couple questions, no real concerns. That was on Wednesday. My phone started ringing Thursday with people out of Austin and locally. So that's at least good news that that's up on the radar. Moving on to executive session. City Council will hold an executive session pursuant to provisions of Chapter 591 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with Item 11, Section 591.07 on consultation with attorney, seeking the advice of attorneys about contemplated litigation or settlement on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. Concho Street Drainage Project. Item 12, Section 551.074, personnel matters, deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. City Secretary evaluation. The time is 8:13. We're in
That's right.
Right.
Time is 8:41, and Rockport City Council is back in session.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn, Ms. Hatton, a second, Ms. Villa, all in favor? Aye. The time is 8:32, and we're adjourned.
32 or 8:42?
42.
All I know is